all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. So it was more, it was a calling, but it was also, I read the command and felt I don't have an option to not go. And there were stories that challenged me as well, like the story of the Dem people. So in 2013, missionary pilot David Holston took a small mission airplane and flew 4 missionary families into the Dem village. He could feel when he flew from a neighboring village, it had an understanding of the gospel, into the Dem village, a very palpable sense of darkness from the people who had never heard the love of God. Over the next 8 years, and point this at the right thing, they translated the Bible and also began teaching literacy classes so they could read the scripture in their own language. Once that was complete, they began teaching the Bible chronologically from creation through Christ. As they taught how God created man and woman in his own image, the Dem men came to the missionaries and said, "We have been living wrong all our lives. We've been beating these women, but they're creating God's image. We have been doing wrong." And they progressed through Sodom and Gomorrah. The Dem men said, "We've been living evil like these people of Sodom and Gomorrah. We need now to follow God's teaching and do what he wants us to do." But one of the most amazing things that really touched me was after they taught on the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, a Dem woman came up to the missionary ladies, tears streaming down her face, but smiles all over. And she said, "I've been living in darkness and fear, but now, hearing God's teaching, I am just so happy believing that Jesus has saved me." So stories like that are why I uprooted and moved to SMAT, as our acronym for our school, which is we should have a better one, but that's what it is. And in 2019, I started the maintenance program, which was a lot of fun. I really had no mechanical experience other than working in the OR, so I didn't know what to expect, but definitely ended up enjoying it. And we did all sorts of fun things like taking nasty broken down alternators, taking them all apart, sandblasting, fixing them up, and painting them pretty colors, influenced by my father. I also learned I love grease, so I always wanted to pack the wheel bearings, and learned that aircraft mechanics are fueled by chocolate. It was 36 different subject areas to cover everything that's on an airplane. So we did, make sure I don't get too far off my notes, fiberglass repair, and also a lot of electrical projects where we'd wire up the whole system. And my friend Diana and I worked on this project, and we were really happy that it worked in the end because we didn't have a clue of how to do it in the beginning. And we would search in the scraps for things to include. We would get interesting, not very phonometers that we decided not to include in a project. The kind of capstone of the year that I really enjoyed was overhauling an engine, and this was a IO 520 Continental engine. We took it down to, everything that could come apart, came apart. And some we fixed, some was fine. And then it was sort of a love-hate relationship. But in the end, we got it back on the airplane. And after, I think it was maybe 10 or 12 tries, it started up and ran beautifully. So that was a sense of accomplishment. After graduating maintenance school with my A&P airframe and power plant certificate, I went right into the flight program. And one of their specialties is after your first solo at SMAT, they give you a solo shower. Some people got a lot more wet than others. Some people didn't have a clue it was coming, but I heard about it, so I was able to come equipped. We have quite a number of airplanes in our fleet, and I'll go through this somewhat quickly. Those of you that love flying can ask me more questions later. We have 3 like this Cessna 172 S model. And then we have this one 172 N model. It's a little older than the S models. We have it on its tail part of the year, but then the other part is a tricycle gear with the nose on the front like these. But this airplane actually has a special story. It came to us from Moody Aviation, where it trained hundreds, I think, of missionary pilots. And my instructor, Neil, actually soloed in this airplane. So it's been around for a long time. And then Moody was loaning it to us for our flight training. And this past year, they donated the airplane to us. So that was a very generous gift from Moody. And we also have this 182, which normally 182s are tricycle gear with a nose wheel on front. But we got some special permission from the FAA and able to put it on its tail for training. And we got our complex endorsements with this Piper Arrow, which is an airplane that has flaps, which you can't really see in this picture, but they'd be on the trailing edge of the wing, retractable gear, so it can pull the gear up inside, and a constant speed propeller, which is a prop to make it more efficient. And I got my tailwheel training in this Citabria, which is a really fun little airplane. It's small and very responsive, and I didn't do any loops or spins, but it's capable of that. And then MAF loans us their Cessna 206 for training, and we keep it equipped. If one of theirs would go down, they would ask us to get it back to them. And this one, I was going to look up which countries it served in. I think it was Haiti and Honduras where it flew before it came to us. But this one has some special good memories and some painful memories, because our one instructor that trained us in it was not compassionate. He liked to train by telling us everything we did wrong and not what we did right. So if he didn't mention something, we figured we were doing it right. But we had the unique opportunity to use this as part of a mission along with a training flight. And we stuffed it full of winter clothes and flew them to Michigan's Upper Peninsula to a mission up there and saved them about 2 days of travel till they would have come down to Fremont where the clothes were. And there's my classmate Alex stuffed in the back with the bags. I did the flight up and he did the flight back so we could each get experience. That was my first time flying over water out of range of glide distance to land. And my instructor told me, he's like, as soon as you hit that spot where you can't glide to land, you're going to hear your engine shut down. And it didn't actually, but it's like, Engine sounds different. Oh, I hear different noises. My gauge looks a little lower than what it was. And of course, everything's perfectly normal, but knowing that if you go down into the water, it changes what you hear and see. Thankfully, we made it just fine and got over to the Upper Peninsula and unloaded everything in the guys' pickup, and they were very grateful for what we did. And then we were able also to fly a little further west and pick up a guy that was in a snowmobile accident. And he was up there on vacation, had the accident, and would have had like a 9-hour trip back home. And he had, I think it was ruptured hamstring, broken ribs, so it's been very, very painful in a car. But we were able to give him about an 1.5-hour flight back to his home, and he was very grateful as well. And as usually happens in aviation, we had unexpected events, so it got back after dark, which our instructor, of course, was certified for. But got the airplane tucked all safe and sound back in the hangar, and we were safe and sound as well. One of the other highlights of the year was a mountain flying experience. We took our 206 and then went down to North Carolina to Missionary Air Group and picked up their 206 and took about a week just flying in the mountains of West Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina. That was most of where we did. And doing ridge crossings, finding difficult airstrips. And it would be often cloudy and overcast, and it reminded me a lot of life, where things seem dreary and bleak and there's no end in sight, but the sun is always on top. So I love those experiences when we would sneak out through the valleys under the overcast, find a hole in the clouds, get on top, and see the sun still up there. We would wait towards mid-afternoon. Usually the fog would start to dissipate, and then we'd get down in the valleys, and our instructors would limit us to a couple hundred feet above the ridges to fly. So we had to be flying through the valleys and then navigate over the passes, and they always told us, you have to fly along the ridge so that you have room in the valley to turn back around. And in class, like, yeah, that makes sense. But they told us, you're always going to want to go to the middle of the valley because you're scared of the ridges. And I'm like, oh no, we'll be brave. We can fly like we're supposed to. We got down there and we'd be flying. We try to get as close as what we thought to the ridge. And the instructor say, no, get closer. But there's trees and there's rocks and there's scary stuff over there. But then they would show us our turn radius would keep getting smaller the closer we got to the middle. Say, got to get to the ridge, that's your safety. So they really worked with us to do that well, and some did better than others of us. We flew at night, we flew in the cold, we flew in the summer heat. We did instrument training where we wore these funny little devices that restricted our vision, so we just saw the instrument panel, which in instrument flying, I really like cloudy days because I didn't have to wear those. I could actually fly in the clouds, which was really fun. After lots of hard work, literal blood, sweat, and tears, we were able to finally graduate and get our captain's bars, which our instructor told us they're a symbol of our hard work and our responsibility as pilots, but don't ever wear them in actual airport where there's airline captains because they will put you in your place. And there are two of my instructors, Paul on the far left, Neil on the right, who really ministered to me, obviously in flying, but also spiritually and building my character throughout the year. So after, it was kind of before graduation, all I was thinking about was flying because it took up my entire mental capacity. But I thought, well, I should probably figure out what organization I'm going to join to go do mission work. And I didn't have time to think about it, but was a couple weeks before graduation, and SMAT's CEO came to me and said, Christina, we know your heart is for missions, and we'd like to offer you a job here at SMAT to gain experience. I was like, well, thank you, Lord. I didn't have to think about it after all. You gave it to me. So I accepted the position. And what it is, I am actually a missionary with Proclaim Aviation, and this is just a screenshot of their website. But what Proclaim does is they'll take somebody like me, a new graduate, and take us through all the experience and partnership development training and help break down obstacles, because the statistics are that 80% of graduates who want to go to the mission field never make it there. And that's due to financial difficulties, not getting experience, or getting sidetracked and getting a job in corporate or airlines or whatever, and forgetting about missions. So Proclaim comes alongside us and breaks down on those barriers. And it worked perfectly for me to join Proclaim, get my experience at SMAT. And what that will look like is I'm working on the maintenance side with maintenance students as an instructor in the lab. So they have classroom time with instructors that have more experience and can talk to them more. And then out in the lab, I'm there to answer questions, help them with projects, and also work on SMAT's airplanes myself. And then I get flight time in the evenings or Saturdays to keep building that. This is a strut on an engine mount. We just have the engine, I should have got a picture of that, but just the engine itself on the stand so you can work on them and practice running them up. But this also reminds me a little bit of life. Life doesn't make sense, seems like patchwork sometimes. But what this is 4 different students are given the project of removing corrosion from the steel strut, priming it and painting it. So it's 4 different stages that we see there. Each student was a little different stage. And I didn't get a picture of the finished product, but it looked really nice. And another thing we did recently was safety wiring, which this stuff, I don't know why it's called safety wire, because every time I work with it, I end up bloody. So it's more like danger wire. But it's designed to hold the bolts in place so they don't start to back out, which is really important on a propeller, so your bolts don't back out and your propeller depart the aircraft. I struggled with this when I was in maintenance school, and there was a couple of struggling with it as I was teaching them. And one of them told me, he said, Christina, I get the idea. Can't you see I know what I'm supposed to do? Isn't that, I mean, that's good enough. Just sign off my lab. And I was like, no, Michael. First of all, I got to see that you can actually do it, because it'll come back on me if you fail the FAA exam. But most importantly, I hope you graduate. I think you're going to graduate. You can do good work. And you'll be working in somebody's shop and doing safety wire on a propeller that somebody's going to get in the airplane and fly. And if that safety wire isn't done right, the bolts back out, you're responsible for that person's death. And he said, oh, okay, I'll try a couple more times. Yeah, that's a good idea. And this is another project I've taken on myself. My supervisor said, oh, Christina, you don't have to do that. But I was like, what it is, we have a whole cart full of all kinds of engine parts, O-rings, and that's what these are, and gaskets and a lot of other things. And it's a mess because students from other years just rifle through it and don't care about organization. And when I went through, we would spend hours trying to look for the correct part. It's like, if I can save these students time on frivolous things so they can actually work on their engines, that'll be really helping them out. So I'm trying to organize this mess, which my supervisor said, well, only work on it a couple hours at a time or your mind will go crazy, which is true. And this Cessna 414 just arrived this past Friday, Thursday or Friday, I think, about a week ago. Someone donated it to us. They were done using it. It's barely airworthy. They had to fix some fuel leaks and oil leaks, and half the rudder wasn't working right, so they had to replace that. But they donated it to our maintenance school, and it'll be very much a blessing because it has lots of some de-icing boots. It's a pressurized cabin, so lots of things for the students to really get good experience on. And we also have other airplanes in our fleet. But I like this picture because it reminds me, even though I really like airplanes and airplanes are fun to fly, they're just a tool. And I heard another missionary pilot one time say, yeah, he flew Cessna Caravans. And he said, they're just a 15-passenger van with wings. I'm nothing special. I drive airplanes, people drive trucks. And I really appreciated that perspective. And it helps me remember that we are tools in God's hands and can be used as, we have the potential to be used as He wants us to be used. And we all have different roles. So I brought this little object lesson. This is a bowl that I attempted to make. That's why I'm not a sheet metal expert. But I used this mallet to hammer it out of a flat piece of sheet metal. And I'm sure all of you have seen a screw before and a magnet. So as a mechanic, I use both of these tools, but they had to be used for what they were meant to be used for. So if I tried to use this mallet to pick up the screw, it's completely hopeless. There's no way to do it. If I use my precious magnet to hammer out some sheet metal, it would not be very precious anymore. So the magnet can pick up the screw beautifully, and the mallet in the hands of a skilled sheet metal worker can make a beautiful bowl or airplane part or whatever is needed. But just like these tools are meant for a purpose, each of us are called to something specific. And God called me to serve for now at SMAT, and I think in the future overseas, but that's up to God. Whether He calls me longer at SMAT or overseas, we'll see. But all of you aren't called to that. But each of us are called to participate in bringing the gospel to every nation. So for some, that's to pray for others. Some, that's to give financially. And this pilot uses the tool of the airplane. This is Joel Giesland, and they are also in Papua, Indonesia. And he moved there, might have been about a year ago, but because the landscape of Papua is so rugged and mountainous, it takes several months of training with a flight instructor to learn to navigate the mountains, figure out the weather systems, and land on the tiny airstrips that are often hand-carved out of the side of mountains. So he was flying with his instructor this past spring, and they got a call over the radio saying there was a woman at a nearby village who had given birth about 3 days previously, and she was having complications. She was bleeding out. The baby and her were both in danger of dying. So they put aside their plans for the day and headed to the village. And when they got there, they saw the woman was in great distress, and her husband was there as well. He is very distraught. They loaded her and the baby into the airplane and were able to deliver her to a hospital where she got the care that she needed. But the village they were in, as Joel climbed out with his airplane and looked around, all he could see was mountainous terrain and jungle stretching for miles. The airplane was their only lifeline to hope and help. Joe could do it for that village, but there's many villages still today that do not have airplanes or pilots. And that's where people at home come in, because we cannot do it on our own. We don't have our own financial support to be able to support an airplane and all that goes into that. And biggest of all that I've noticed for myself in the last 2 years is prayer. I know there's no way that I could have ever gotten through the maintenance and flight training without my family and friends praying for me. And that is a vital part. So as you leave tonight, I ask you to consider partnering with me. But what that looks like is we would each have a part. What I would do is be your hands and feet on the ground right now with the maintenance students, encouraging them into missions. And we have a couple that are not saved, so ministering to those, working on airplanes, and then eventually going on the field, bringing life, hope, and healing to those that have not yet heard the gospel. And also I ask you to pray for me. As I said, I need it. And then let people know. Let's see, I'm getting that messed up. Yes, I'll be your hands and feet. I need you to pray for me. I will pray for you. Because it's not easy living here in the US either. We think of missionaries overseas need prayer, but those of us at home definitely need prayer too. And I would communicate regularly, whether that's through newsletters or email, maybe a phone call. And then what your role is in praying, and then monthly financial commitment and advocacy, that you would tell others about my ministry, and if they're interested, they could contact me. I do have sign-up sheets in the back. It has a place for your name, phone number, email, and then at the end is 2 columns. One, if you're interested in my newsletter, just put a check mark. And if you're interested, I'd love to talk to you tonight if you're interested in partnership, but I totally understand if you want to think about it. If you want to think about it, on the far right column of that sheet, it says partnership. So just put a check mark there. Make sure you put your phone number, and I'll call you sometime next week and we can talk. If you have more questions, you don't have to make any commitment, but just to find out more. And I think that is all that I have. Oh, if you want to make a donation online, proclaimaviation.org is a website, and there you go to that website, and at the top there's Our Missionaries tab that drops down, and my portal is in there. You can click on donate. And I also have some forms at the back if you prefer a check. So are there any questions? I think I saw you first. You can solo at 14, get your license at 16, I think. All right. I'll get my CFI and trainer. We do all fixed wing right now in our flight training. We do have 2 helicopters on the maintenance side. The one doesn't have an engine, but we can still study the rotor system. The other does have an engine that we work on. I don't think it has a transmission though. So bits and pieces. Yes.
Since you're a certified A&P.
Yes.
What do you say?
Airframe and power plant mechanic. Because you can get one or the other. You just work on airframe or just work on engine. But that I've got experience in both. Any other questions? It depends on the organization. Most like JARS and MAF require 500 hours, which I have with my private training I got home here before I went to Michigan. I have just over 400, but SMAT guarantees 250 hours. So that's part of what Proclaim does, is get you the extra hours after graduation that you need. Anyone else? I'll turn it back over to Adam. And I'll just say thank you again to everyone. It means a lot that you're here.
Thank you, Christina. Rise with me as we pray. Dear Father, thank you for giving us this meeting here together, and thank you for the moving of your ministry over the world. And thank you for giving us a gospel to carry and for choosing to do it through your people. Pray for Christina and the blessing of her. She continues to follow that call. I pray for the students and the staff there that she's working with, and I pray for the future of her life that you have yet to reveal. And I pray for each one who's here tonight. Thank you for bringing them here. I pray for the gifting and calling that you've given to each member of your body to come forth in power and display your love and God to everyone that you have created. And especially those who have yet to hear or never seen it, never heard it. You said that you are light and the light is surrounded with darkness. The darkness couldn't stop it. And that's what we want to be a part of. And thank you for giving us that opportunity. And for your protection from the power of the evil. Filling in your spirit for those who are on the front lines, and those in between, and they're making the way possible to come home. Thank you for the faith, church, and the body over the world. Thank you for the gift of Christ. You are the one who we glorify, and you are the one who we want to focus all energy for. And thank you for giving yourself and your life for us. We pray all in the name of Jesus. Amen. You can be seated. Thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate seeing you here. And there is a snack prepared in the back, and there is a table along the back wall where you can find the sign-up sheet that Christina talked about, and anything you want to pick up some of the, take a look at some of the little things you have there. I think there's some flyers and I think pictures as well as the sign-up. And if you need the bathrooms, they're upstairs in the back of the hallway.